A warm welcome to this week's The Leeds Business Podcast with me, Steve Twynham, and
Rudy Hayward.
The Business Podcast is in partnership with
Network B2B
and
Famous Wolf and Rhubarb Radio.
Who broadcast across the Wakefield district and South Leeds. So welcome to this week's Leeds Business Podcast. It's Steve and Rudy with you once again. How are you, Rudy?
I'm good, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm very well indeed. Very well indeed. Good to be back together again. And here we go, another virtual Leeds Business Podcast. And Rudy, tell us who we've got joining us today then.
So we have Dan from Aspire Property. So he's going to tell us all that there is to know about the business and how to invest in property. I've recently been watching Dan's YouTube, one of his YouTube videos where he's doing an actual TED talk, which is massively impressive. I really like that. So I'm sure he'll be able to tell us more about that today. So welcome, Dan.
Yeah, welcome, Dan. How are you?
Thank you very much. Good to be on here as well with both of you, Rudy and Steve. It's pleasure.
Let's have some fun. Let's enjoy the next, 45 minutes or so. Well, let's find out a lot more about the property market. But I guess, Rudy, over to you then. What would you like to ask first of all?
Yeah. So first things first, I just wanted to know, how did you get started? How did you get into property investment how did it all start? How did it all begin?
Okay, cool. So I think it's best maybe to share the background just to help understand where all that came from. So I'm 28 now. My business partner Jamie York, who was hoping to be with us today, but he's currently in Ibiza, possibly going to be stuck there. We don't know yet, but let's see.
Right.
And the internet wasn't quite working for him. But even so we moved to Leeds about 5 years ago. So you'll see the accent's obviously not Yorkshire. So don't shoot me for that. But we moved here 2015, and before that, I was, like I'm sure many people listening, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a teenager, I wanted to make money. And I covered this in the TED Talk, so thanks for referring to that, Steve. But it's a really good, it shows the journey, was that when I was young, I learned that you had to have a job to get money. And maybe you guys have heard that. So, so I went into a part-time job when I was at school, and then a full-time night job. I don't know if you've ever done night shifts, any of you, but like...
Certainly have.
Yeah.
From 9 at night till 6 in the morning, I was doing that in a warehouse. And, the hourly rate or whatever it wasn't good. But I basically ran out of time left to make money with. And I was like, still earning a bit of money, but it was like holding on to sand. The money would come in and then all of a sudden it disappeared out the other end. And this was when I was 16, 17. So I thought, I need to give something different a go. I need to rewire what I'm thinking. And property had always been in the background. I'm sure you guys have watched Homes Under the Hammer, which, features a lot of property in Yorkshire actually. But it's I've watched every single episode of that back to back when I was younger, to the point where we knew what music was coming on, that sort of thing. And, so you pick up a lot of ideas. And obviously property in the north is cheaper, but still didn't have the money for it. So myself and Jamie, we tried to make some money in stocks and trading and stuff like that. So we made a bit of money on essentially betting on the financial markets. And at the time I thought it was a genius. I was 18. We made nearly $250,000 doing that. But it was complete chance. So in hindsight, I say chance, like as in obviously there was a strategy to it, but what do you think happens when two 18-year-olds have a load of money all of a sudden?
I guess you go and enjoy it, don't you?
Well, pretty much, yeah. As in, this money stopped replacing itself. And fortunately, I think it was, the longer you carry on with something like that, the house always wins. And we were just quite grateful to actually stop and realise, we've had a good run here. Highly leveraged, highly risky. But at 18, we didn't know any better. We'd taken the $3-4 grand we had saved together and really leveraged that to make some money there, but it was chance. But by the time I went traveling for a year, I spent a lot of that money on, I say silly things, good fun things, like bungee jumps and stuff like that. But, doing what a teenager would do, which is spend it. I went to university in York, and spent a lot of money there as well. And by the time I kind of caught myself, by the time I grew up, between myself and Jamie, we had about 30 grand left. Maybe 30 to 40 grand left to start in property. And we've also no credit history, no job, still at university, stuff like that. And we, because of Homes Under the Hammer, we'd heard of Burnley a few times. Now, have you ever had the pleasure of going to Burnley?
Yes, Dan, I have.
Are you like me, where you're not so sure if it's a pleasure or not? I know it's the other side of
yes, yeah. Be careful what we say, but yes.
In the enemy's territory, man, Yorkshire and Lancashire. No, yes. It was obviously a lovely place, but we were looking at the houses that were 20 odd grand there. So with Homes Under the Hammer, we saw there was houses that were 20 grand there. The theory was we buy it for 20, spend 10 on it, and it'd sell it for 40, right? Which sounds like a good idea. And it took a bit of travel, going up there, and it was 100 miles from where I was based in York and 300 miles from where Jamie was based. And so we'd get in our van, then drive up there, maybe have a stop on the service stations on the way, put Bon Jovi on the car and try and make some serious chats with estate agents. And eventually we got taken seriously enough to be shown a house. And it was number 36 Burdett Street in Burnley. And when we opened the door, you could just smell the profit. You could smell the fact that, they hadn't been decorated since the 50s. There was a lot of work needing doing to the house. And we thought, okay, cool. We can make some money off of this. As I said, we'll spend 10 grand on it and sell it for 40. It was on the market for 22 and we did an absolute great negotiation. I'm saying that just in case it's not coming over with sarcasm, sir. 22 grand and we got it for 21,800. The reason I share this story is because it's kind of showing what not to do. Is that we didn't know any better. We just thought you have to buy a house in cash. You go to an agent to get a property, which we almost never do now, or at least not unless you've got a very good relationship with them. And it culminated in us. We couldn't do the works ourselves despite trying because it was two teenagers traveling to do these works. So we got the next door neighbour to do it. And I'm sure many of you, I guess, Steve and Rudy mentioned, leverage, outsource. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we thought we'll outsource to him. He seems like a handyman, seems a good lad. And so we paid him, we bought materials, we paid for a kitchen, but we didn't pay him for the labour because we didn't want to pay him for the labour just yet. So we left that with him, expecting 2 weeks to come back and, the kitchen to be installed, maybe with a few bits here and there. But I remember going back up and opening the key to number 36. We walked in the door, mate, and nothing had changed. The house was completely the same. So going around next door, like number 34 and knocking on the door. And, there was no answer. But when someone's in the house, the curtains, the Venetian blinds were waving. So I peered up against his window. And he'd installed our kitchen in his house.
I was just thinking that as you were saying.
Well, there was nothing we could do, and he'd done a bloody good job at it as well. Or very good job, I should say, yeah. It was definitely solidly in there. We weren't getting that back out. And for a business person who's doing the numbers here, you'll realise already this is now a loss-making exercise. We've got a house which has been ripped out, but nothing else has happened to it. So it's in worse condition than we bought it. We spent a lot of the money we had on someone else's house. So the reason we got into property was because we knew that it was an investment vehicle that will continue to make money for us. But we just learned how not to do it. And so I had to meet a few people who had a bit more experience. And one of those was a chap at university, a young lad called Alex, who was doing the same degree as me, a couple of years older, but he was already a property millionaire. And he gave us some guidance. He said, look, learn from this person and read this book. So he sent us to a company called Progressive, who are a property education company. And there's a lot of those out there, to avoid. So make sure you get some good advice. I'm happy to help anyone who's seeking that in terms of the ones that are good and the ones that are not so. But he put us in the right direction. And we then had next to no money to get started again. But property investment makes you money in 3 ways. And for those listening, it's our businesses make us good cash flow, but the reason we invest in property is because it gives you rental income now, today. It gives you capital growth over time. And I'm not saying that happens in a straight line, but it does happen over a vast number of years. And then also it gives us rental growth as well. So rents grow much faster than inflation. And between those 3 things, like with some good guidance, there's some creativity as well. You struggle not to make money in the long run. So that's why we started in property, and plus you kind of love it as well. It's not it's not like we're doing anything boring here. We're going into houses, ripping them apart, or people are. So it's good fun as well.
So Dan, I got to ask, how did you know Jamie then?
So we met at school. So many people obviously meet business partners, and there's sometimes working with friends can be an absolute blessing, and sometimes it can be not the thing to do. So we were very close friends at school. Because I'm on here, I'm going to say I was the cool one and he was the not so cool one. Unfortunately, it probably wasn't quite that way around. However, we both were young and wanted to make money, and just realised we had similar mindsets or similar goals, but differing skill sets. So he's a lot more, let's say, sales driven, and the sort of thing, whereas I'm a lot more analytical and. So for instance, I take care of finance, numbers, training in our business, and he does the sales and marketing and growth. And those two characters, are very common when there's a business partnership. So we were lucky to have that.
Okay, wow. So obviously things progressed for you, and did you still buy some more in Burnley but avoid the neighbour?
Oh no! So the mistake we made there was. It's what you call scattergunning, which is we were buying property hundreds of miles away from where we lived, which isn't a problem in itself, but we had no area knowledge. We'd bought in if you imagine a Monopoly board, we'd bought in the Old Kent Road area, the worst area of town where the things like getting your kitchen stolen is probably a normal day. But whereas now you want to buy sort of in the more orange, purple ones, so sort of 2 to 4 out of 10 areas. And that's transferred obviously to Leeds and Yorkshire. It's worth saying we moved to Leeds. I'd love to say it was by design, but it's partly by chance. But it's a brilliant city to live in. So I moved here in 2015, as I said, but Jamie wanted to move away from his parents. He didn't want to live near his mum's house. It's within an hour, so he wanted to move away. And two of the friends that went with him had the same. So that meant London was out and Liverpool was out. So it was between Manchester, Leeds, and Birmingham. And one of them just happened to have a good night out in Leeds once. They'd been to one of the clubs and said, it was pretty good. So we chose here.
So as things moved on for you then, so how many properties have you got now, and how's the market changing with COVID and things?
Yeah, so we only control about 32 properties. And the reason I say about is because just as I'm doing this, we're completing on another one. So it may happen just literally whilst we're on this podcast, to be honest with you. And some of those are flips.
What's a flip?
So that's a property that we buy to sell. So within the property industry, a lot of people are familiar with a lot of people on the wider community, let's say, are familiar with buy to let and are familiar with buy to sell. Right? You get your agent appraisal at the end of a show like Homes into Hammer, and they see, you're you get to rent it or sell it for profit, and that's the two things. But there's a whole host of other strategies to property than that. And it enables you to have a lot less money in a deal, but to be able to still do deals. So there's a lot of different other strategies. But we've now grown from a business of just two of us to, I think we hired our first staff member in 2016. We moved office. So I don't know if it's all right to ask, do you want me to share the personal journey or the business one, or maybe a bit of both?
Let's do a bit of a mixture.
Yeah, cool. So when we first moved to Leeds, we did a strategy called rent to rent. And some of the listeners may have heard of this, which is, let's say that you, Rudy, had a house, you're a landlord. Yep. I would say, okay, cool. If you rent that property in the open market, Rudy, say it's a 4-bed house, you'll get £1,000 a month. I'm making the numbers up. Other numbers are available. How about I rent it off you for £800 a month? But what I'll do is I'll guarantee that rent for you for 5 years. So you'll have no maintenance, no voids, no management charge, which is usually about 12 to 15% anyway. I imagine you're going to come out net on top of that. Does that sound good? And we'd speak to a landlord and take control of the property like that. And then with their permission, obviously, because you need to have the correct agreements in place, you then rent out the rooms for profit. And that was what we did. That was our strategy.
No.
Yeah. So you take a property on that's It might already be a HMO. So within Leeds, I believe the whole Yorkshire region, you might have seen this over the last few years, the student lets in the middle of town have gone absolutely crazy, haven't they? They're gorgeous as well, if you ever drive past and been inside them. Of the 10 properties the 10 largest buildings being built in Leeds, 6 of them are student accommodation right now. So it means that all of these HMOs that used to be student lets, they're going to have to do something different with them. And that was happening in 2015, 2016 when we were moving here as well. So we'd rent those existing but underperforming HMOs from a landlord, like I just described, Rudy, and then we'd rent the rooms out to young professionals. And that included us. So we took a room in our own HMO. And
Brilliant.
Yeah, so to pay yourself rent. And, you know, it's a bit weird because you're living with tenants who are kind of paying you. But it was good fun as well. And but we graduated, so we had 1, then 2, and we ended up with 14 of those in total. So 70 rooms in total, which gave us our oxygen. That was our cash flow, you know, our lifeblood to keep going. And then we started a strategy which is called deal packaging. So deal packaging or property sourcing is where you find a property for an investor, but rather than buy it yourself. So let's say Steve was looking for a property, but he didn't have the time or the funds or the inclination, or you'd have to have the funds, sorry, but then we'd sell that to Steve for a fee. And that's a very common strategy. And there's obviously a lot more to it, but the simple nuts and bolts of it are, that's a busy business owner may come and ask us to find property for them. So we did more and more of that. We had then 1 member of staff, then 2, then 3, and kind of moved around Leeds. So we moved from the middle of town. There was a place, one of the service offices we were in, and then we moved up to, we're now in Horsforth, so Wyra Business Park, just off the Ring Road. So there's 14 seats behind me now, plus R2 as well, that are all now filled up. And we ran out of chairs the other day, which is a bit of a nice little touch point. So the deal packaging's developed. Obviously, there's lots of different arms to property. The deal packaging's developed. We've owned an estate agency now as well, which I'll come on to talk about. And yeah, that's all grown.
Good stuff.
Where in the future do you want to take the business then? Because obviously you've done so much already. What's kind of the future plans for you?
I think that every entrepreneur can go one of 2 ways, and you're either a lifestyle entrepreneur or an empire entrepreneur. You know, a lifestyle entrepreneur is like, right, I want to be set myself. I want to, grow my business to a certain point, and then I want to go traveling. I want to go skiing. I want to go wherever it is for you. And then an empire entrepreneur is like, they want to take over their niche. Some entrepreneurs want to take over the world, obviously, and that's cool. But for us, we want to be almost the best, but in our own sector. I'm not about to go and buy an ice cream truck or something like that. But we want to be as good as we can in property. And so there's a few other arms that we want to add on. So for instance, we've now got about 40 or so properties per month going through legals, which means that we can grow and work with a solicitor to have some sort of legal, referral agreement there. Or we recently started an estate agency. And so the businesses that we're adding on now all dovetail. And that's where we want to get to. Plus, as you mentioned, Jamie's got a YouTube channel. We really think that helping other people grow in the right way is useful too. So we want to do more of that.
So Dan, apart from having your kitchen installed, that's an awesome story in somebody else's house. You've talked about the ups. What about the downs and the challenges that people find? Because sometimes you hear these stories on the internet. People park the Ferrari outside and they've gone and rented it for a day or whatever to tell a nice story. Mm-hmm. We're all about we're in the real world. There are ups and downs and challenges.
Yeah.
What's the sort of biggest one you face, do you think?
So I think in terms of the people parking their Ferraris outside, obviously the property training industry, let's say, which I guess is what you're referring to, or indeed, sometimes people imagine sort of sleazy salesman with greased back hair selling real estate. And that was certainly the case back in 2007, 2008, as I understand it. People selling properties abroad. There's a few things that I would fundamentally avoid. So for instance, if you're looking for property education or training, trust but verify what the person's saying. So, do they have a physical office? Are they VAT registered? Go with a provider that's CPD certified, so continual personal development certified, or has some other recourse or redress scheme. And when it comes to property itself, I think making sure that you know the area you're investing in, or at least you know someone that does. So the biggest mistakes I've seen people make is when they buy abroad. And it sounds sexy to tell your mates you're an international property investor, but there's so many variables that aren't in your power, So that's probably where I'd say the biggest mistake is. And we actually did that early on. We invested abroad. Unfortunately, we got the money back from that. But it was a lesson to never do it again. We were just completely relying on someone else. And we couldn't go and visit it. This was a property that was in Dakota. That was another mistake. Again, it was 5-6 years ago. We invested some money over there. And it's like, there's nothing you can do. That's not, it's not how to do it. So
what on earth put you to Dakota? I thought you were going to say Spain.
Well, we went to one of the property investor shows. So in London, the property investor community has 2 big shows a year, and I'm sure there's others, but in the Excel in London. And I remember going there, and essentially, like I just described, there are always people there selling foreign property. And this opportunity sounded, in hindsight, I tell myself it sounded too good to be true. But hindsight's 20/20, and I unfortunately was only about 22 at the time, so it was easy for him to sell me into that opportunity, and we just about got out of it. But yeah, the biggest mistakes of the people I've trained have almost always been when they've either bought abroad or bought several properties in different areas in the UK. Like one in John O'Groats and one in Land's End, like not quite extreme, but yeah. So.
Have you found that during this period of time, have you found that the pandemic has affected the property market at all? And has it affected it in a kind of in a negative way, or has it affected it in a positive way? Because I've heard kind of mixed things out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, so it's a bit of madness, isn't it? So obviously, a lot of businesses are affected by COVID, and I hope that everyone's going to muscle through that and do the best they can. And some maybe have seen an uplift as well. And in property, we've kind of seen just more activity going on. So when people started and heard about COVID, I think a lot of people expected the market to drop or bomb, obviously having been based in Leeds, I know the chap at Auction House, who runs the auction there, and he was saying that a lot of investors were coming to them saying, are we going to get really good deals now? And the same to us as well. And the answer's been no. Like the market's been completely strong. If anything, we have what's called the Easter boom, like as in normally February, March, April time is a really good time to sell property. And that's obviously couldn't happen. So that it's almost like that's all been condensed into this June, July period. Maybe June in particular was absolutely crazy. So it's not seen a negative at all. And I think that a lot of people expected there to be, and I'll say what it is, call a spade a spade. They expected people to be losing jobs and this sort of stuff and having to sell low and cheap and quick. But that's not been the case, and certainly not that quickly. And if anything, there's been a lot of people looking for property. It's a safe asset. It's not something that's, what's the word? You can guess at speculative. It's something that's solid, bricks and mortar, you can touch and see. And in the long run, it's always a good investment. So people, I think, are wanting more of it.
Dan, you mentioned earlier about it not being linear, because it goes, is it, I heard somebody once say it goes in like 7-year cycles. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think 7 years is maybe a bit tight in terms of the cycles. But so if we went back 10 years now, so where we're 2020 to 2010, property prices generally is said double every 10 to 12 years. But that's not, what I mean by that's not in a straight line, is if we went back to 2010 or indeed 2008, it's obviously not double what it is now. And in fact, in most of Leeds, it would have grown past that. So it would have had a dip and grown past that. In bits of Bradford, maybe it's not even reached that 2008 level yet. But if we go back 20 years, back to the early 2000s, prices were a quarter of what they are now. Today the average house price in England is 227,000, and in 1950 it was about 1,700 quid. for a house, right? and that sort of adds up to doubling every 10 to 12 years. So it's steep. It's just you don't know where those waves go, but it's always been the case that death taxes and property prices go up.
Have you noticed, because you mentioned the estate agency that you started with because one of the things that we've come across, because we've had property development companies contact us recently, and one of which that we're currently working with at the moment, and one of their stumbling blocks was trying to get still organise viewings of properties. Because of the fact of the coronavirus and people not being able to go in and out and social distancing and all that jazz. We kind of went down the virtual route in terms of trying to do virtual viewings, and we found that it's been quite successful in terms of generating those property development companies sales off the back of it. Have you found that the virtual kind of element has worked for you? Have you adopted that, or have you kind of just stuck to the traditional? And have you seen others that do that? And what's your opinion on it?
Oh, so we've definitely adopted the virtual side of it. So obviously lockdown came in, March this year, and I appreciate some people may be listening long after that. So I look forward to seeing what happens in the future. But it came in March, and it's pretty much like everyone has to stay at home. So a few weeks before, well, maybe a few days before, we bought everyone that didn't have a laptop, and we made sure that everyone was able to work, even though we were sitting in the office, they were working from their laptop, so that all the teething issues, I can't log on to this, my email's down, that sort of thing, was sorted out with us all in one place, and then everyone went home. And so from there, we then knew everything had to be virtual. So we did two things. We would be able to send a list of things to vendors, so, getting sellers to walk around their house to do tours, which isn't as good as having a proper 3D camera, of course, but we couldn't exactly send a 3D camera out to a vendor. So we just get them to do a good tour of their house. And then more recently, we've started doing those 3D tours for both investment properties and for our estate agency as well. So it's necessary, I think, nowadays. The challenge I think people have, and this is where technology can't ever replace people too much. It can in a lot of ways, but it can't entirely do it, is you lose the opportunity to sell to them. So when they're doing a viewing there, a house, or when they're seeing it, there's bits that they'll miss, or there's a bigger connection there. Whereas a virtual tour, if you stick that on Rightmove, people might not even book a viewing. They might not ever ring you to get in touch. They might just go on there and go, "Oh, it's not for me, thanks." When actually maybe they've missed something, or so we want to be careful of losing the ability to sell to people, because that's what business is about.
And Dan, in terms of the markets at the minute, is the rental market stronger than the buying market? If that makes sense as a question.
Yeah, so I'd say that the buying market is strong and the rental market is absolutely mental. And I think it's more by the forces of supply and demand than anything else. I think this is inevitable to happen, because you've got the number of people in the UK is growing. The number of houses isn't keeping up. So right now there's over 1 million people who are willing and able to rent or buy a house, but the supply isn't there. At the same time, people are, families within households are getting smaller. So people are wanting to move out quicker as well. The number of households is increasing. So people, it sounds weird, but people getting divorced obviously means there's more households, because what used to be lots of one families now two. So there's just, even within the same population, there's more demand for housing, and it just drives rent up. So we had a property in an area of South Leeds the other day that when we initially analysed it, it's probably about 3 months before we bought it, refurbed it, and it's ready to rent. And we thought, you know what, this will rent. It's property in Beeston actually, LS11 sort of postcode, and we said this will rent at about 550. And by the time we got around to renting it, it was 630, which is £80 a month more. And so it's the demand is there for good quality housing.
What about the people that are wanting to buy then, and they're struggling to deposits and things like that? Is that affecting a lot of people? I
imagine it is. So I was fortunate enough, aside from investment property, I actually lived in one of my HMOs for a bit, and then moved to a rental property in in the Leeds dock, Clarence dock area, overlooking thing. And then only 2 or 2.5 years ago, bought my house for the first time. So it's a journey I've been on, obviously buying investment properties a lot of time, but buying your own residential property too. And I found that the biggest stumbling block, people often say it's the deposit, which is one of them, but the Help to Buy scheme that the government runs can assist with that. It's mostly the mortgage multiplier. So would it be all right, Steve, just to explain what I mean by that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, let's say Steve and Rudy, you two were together in a relationship, let's say, and you're buying a house together. So the primary income earner would borrow about 4 to 4.5 times their gross salary, and the secondary person would borrow 2 to 2.5. And that's about the max you can get. And that's on a mortgage, on a residential mortgage for 30 years. And it's that multiplier that makes it harder. Whereas back in 2007-8, there was blooming unlimited, they'd lend you 8-9 times your salary sort of thing. So I feel like a lot of people concentrate on saving, but not on making more money. And this counts for an employee as well. So, if you went to your boss and said, look, I need a salary increase, even if it was a temporary one, I know that's hard to negotiate, but you said, look, I'm going to put in this extra effort. I want my bonus paid this way or whatever it is to push your salary up, and earn more money. No one's ever saved their way to being a millionaire, or if they have, they're very, it's taken a long time. And I think that people entrepreneurs should concentrate, yes, on saving money, but also on making more. And it's the same for people looking to buy a new house. It's like, okay, say you'll see so many financial advisings saying save a cup of coffee here. Millennials spending £3 a day on coffee. That adds up to £100 a month or whatever it is. You can save that aside. You need to concentrate on making more. How can you add more value to your employer? How can you do more in your job? Going to them and asking what you can do extra. I think that's really where the best of us can give to help first-time buyers. There's no golden bullet. There's no secret to, you can't just sort of walk into a mortgage company and go, yeah, just give me a mortgage, mate. I'm all right.
Dan, you took me back there, because when I first bought my first house many, many years ago, there was monthly allocations from the building societies, and you had to put it in, and you'd sit there waiting to see if you were going to be in that month. How times have changed, I guess, or maybe they're going back that way. I don't know.
I was just going to say, just going off on what you've just said, there's this rumor that's going around about, being able to get into property investment or being able to get into property without using your own money. What's all that about?
Oh yeah, I've heard that, Rudy.
So there's a lot of companies or adverts, let's say, at the minute, that advertise no money down. And the truth of it is this: it's completely doable. And I say that with full integrity because I've absolutely done it. However, is it doable for absolutely everyone is the challenge. Like, it's a bit like saying, owning a business, you can become a millionaire. But not everyone that owns a business is going to achieve that goal. And that's where the dichotomy is. Because if someone's saying, buy this deal, no money down, what they generally mean is a creative strategy. And it's worth sharing. I've taught this to hundreds of people, by the way. In a CPD certified organization, continual personal development. So that sort of thing as well. But strategies like rent to rent, like I just described to you earlier, Rudy, that's what people would consider a no money down strategy. It takes very little money. You probably get all your capital back within the first 6 months. And that is doable, but it's not, what I'm trying to say here is it's not easy. As in the difference is it's sold like it's, become a millionaire overnight. And Warren Buffett it took him 32 years to make his first billion, and then after that he was skyrocketing. It's not dissimilar for anyone that gets into property. You need to invest in that, have the knowledge and build the relationships. I've bought 4 properties in the last 30 days or so, but if you asked me that 5 years ago, can you buy 4 properties in the last 30? No chance. So it's doable. It's just be cautious of the ads, and again, check what they're saying. But
Dan, I always think people, how could I put this? They misinterpret the word simple and easy. Yeah. Don't they? Yeah. You know what I mean? If everything was easy, we'd all be doing it, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because it's unregulated, it's an industry where people don't need any level of qualification. So you have some people out there who are giving genuinely good knowledge and actually doing it, which is really what you want to test against some others that maybe have been on a course themselves only a year or two ago and don't have that real life, experience of all the screwing up, the experience of having your kitchen stolen, the experience of, stuff. That's obviously an anecdotal example, but and for a person who's, let's say, brand new to it, and obviously people want to make money, and so I guess people want what person's saying to be true. It's just to be cautious with and check out the people you're dealing with in that regard.
So I tell you what, I guess we're almost out of time, Rudy, but Dan, we should, of course, ask the question, if people want to find out more, want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's worth just sharing the two sort of services we offer, because particularly for people in Yorkshire, our company Aspire Properties, which is our estate agency, we've grown that fairly recently, but it's out of demand. And if it's all right, Stephen and Rudy, I'll just share, I guess, our business rationale for that. It's because when we talk to sellers of houses, so often you find yourself in a situation where to make it work for an investment, they need to have some level of motivation, obviously. And it's a positive thing, that, because it means that as an investor, you're not in a chain, you're not reliant on anyone else. 1 in 3 properties with a normal estate agent will fall out of bed. I think it's 1 in 3 to 1 in 4, according to the associations. But whereas an investor, you don't need to do that. But it means that 80-90% of the people you speak to, they just want to sell their house, let's say, normally. So we decided to start this service for that, so that everyone we speak to about their house, we can at least help them in some way. So aspireproperties.co.uk is our estate agency website. And at the minute, we're allowing people to list on Rightmove for free, to get it all launched, to get a brand going. We've got a lot of experience selling houses as well. So that's, like, people can get in touch with that, and that's fantastic. And our investment side is more, we do the actual sources. We go out and we find houses and do the refurbs and stuff. So anyone who's looking maybe for a HMO, a house of multiple occupancy or something like that, get in touch with us there. But Aspire Properties is the one I'd probably suggest to the listeners.
Well, look, I tell you what, I don't know about you, Rudy, but I've learned a lot in this last 40 minutes. Have you?
Absolutely. I've definitely learned a lot. I think property investment it's like a similar kind of, so it can be seen as a dark art because there's lots of intricacies to it. And I think we know that it's the same in the social media world.
Rudy, I was just going to say that. I was just going to say that. When Dan was talking about the people that have been on a weekend course about property, how many have been on a weekend course and have become social media experts?
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it. It's ridiculous. I completely empathize with that because we have it, obviously, as a social media agency. We completely come across that regularly. So getting that those nuggets of information from you, Dan, have been really useful because, for someone like me, who's a business owner, who's possibly looking into, investing in property, possibly in the near future, they're perfect nuggets of information that's really going to help, myself and also any listeners know what direction to go in. And this is a message to any of the listeners. Anybody that's thinking about it, I highly recommend going and speaking to Dan because he clearly knows his stuff. And I will be one of those people that get in contact with you, Dan, fairly soon. So
cool. Dan, thank you for joining us today on the Leeds Business Podcast. It's been a pleasure. Rudy,
Steve, thank you very much, both of you. Look forward to
it. Whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, go and buy that next property, mate.
See if it's completed. Yeah, it's always It sounds like magic when people complete on properties. It's good stuff.
So have a great day.
Cool.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks. Bye.